Hi and good afternoon. We are ready to start today's event. My name is Rasmus Køjborg, and on behalf of HC Andersen Capital, I would like to welcome you to today's event, where we'll focus on Dfds activities on the North Sea. With me to tell more about this part of the business, I have the pleasure of welcoming Executive Vice President of the Ferry Division in Dfds, that's Peter Geller Petersen, who will take us through the presentation. I know it says Søren in the screen, but it is Peter that is logged on. And before I hand over to you, Peter, I'd also like to welcome all of those who signed up today and is participating. As usually, you can ask questions in the chat in the lower right corner, and we will record this presentation and publish it on different platforms afterwards. And should you want to state a question in Danish, that's fine, we'll do the translation. But with that, I'll leave it to you. Peter, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, and thank you for this opportunity to present our North Sea services to you. Let me start from a helicopter view and present what Dfds is doing on the commercial front. We have two commercial divisions. One is the logistics division that are providing logistics solutions to industries directly, a freight forwarding and a contract logistics business. And then there is the ferry division that provides the network, the infrastructure, making it possible for Dfds Logistics and indeed many other logistics companies around Europe to perform their services to the customers. The network comprises of both rail, sea, and also inland water connections. On the screen now, we are displaying the current Dfds ferry and logistics network and a number of 2021 numbers. A group revenue of 18 billion Danish, of which the ferry division accounts for about 2/3, 12 billion, and an EBITDA number, as you will also see, where ferry accounts for about 85% of the total. We employ, again, 2021 numbers here, 8,900. That figure has increased by the acquisition of a large logistics company. So we are indeed in the range of 11,000 employees today. Ferry division more or less stable at this point in time with about 5,400, or half of the current Dfds number of staffs. We run 26 different routes across Europe into Turkey as well. Some of them are passenger routes, but primarily we operate in freight, and we do that in a number of port terminals as well. Then let me focus on today's topic, namely the North Sea business. From the numbers here, you will realize that the revenue is about 35% of the total ferry business that are generated in the North Sea. So it is indeed an extremely important area for us. Also, about 45% of the EBITDA number is generated here. So only again testaments the importance of the area. In the North Sea, we only operate freight ferries. This is a non-passenger business area. So here we have both directly industrial customers, primarily between Sweden and the UK and the continent, and then forwarders like DHL, DSVs, Kuehne+Nagel of this world as a customer group between the UK and the continent. We operate also in order to make sure that we can actually deliver on our customer promise, own operations in 4 of the terminals, the key terminals in Sweden and the Netherlands and UK, Norway. Just to give you a quick introduction to the different kind of ferry types. Now I've been speaking only freight or passenger. So what we're looking at is the vessel pictured on your left low side, the freight ferry. whereas we have others with a different level of passenger numbers on board, either in the RoPax or on the day ferry, you would know from the channel on the top, and then the almost entire passenger-focused business in the cruise ferry. On the freight ferry, you will see an example of one of our newest vessels built in China and carrying about 450 trailers, equaling 6,500 meters or 6.5 kilometers of deck length. A vessel like that needs a turnaround in the port of about 8 hours. And this is one of the crucial points for us, of course, to be able to turn things around in ports as fast as possible, to reduce port time and increase sea time, thereby lowering our fuel consumption. Not a lot of people on board. Most of it is actually handled by people ashore on the loading and the discharging. But the interesting thing here, and a reason why I dwell a little bit at this picture, is that this new building, and we have 6 of those delivered over the last 3 years, they have reduced our bunker consumption by 30% per unit, which is, of course, an important step towards our climate neutrality in 2050. Focusing even further into what is it then, the roll-on, roll-off freight ferry business? Well, you will see that these trailers are unaccompanied. There are no truck heads in front of them. So the interesting part of our concept here is really this requires a number of preparations and agreements on beforehand. This is not an easy area just to copy paste and start your own little row and roll on and roll off market, because this requires agreements with a number of operators. It requires the infrastructure in terms of terminals, and it requires that a close cooperation between those of our customers using us and the operation that we offer to them. Trailers are left in the terminal. The truck end picks up another trailer and leaves again. And all of that organization needs to be put in place for this whole machine to be operating for our customers and ourselves. It is a relatively stable market when you look at the North Sea. When you look at on your top left-hand side, the volume development since 27, a pretty stable market, but you'll see an increase recent years, and especially 2021, where we are seeing a larger amount of unaccompanied traffic, the one I just explained, over the accompanied traffic, where the trailer is followed by the truck head across, for instance, a ferry service across the channel into the UK. And this is, of course, related to the situation where there's a lack of drivers. There is a desire amongst drivers to have other jobs in their home countries. There is the mobility package that makes the accompanied haulage model more expensive, and thus our unaccompanied row model more attractive. So we see, despite relatively stable or even at times reducing numbers in the traffic between the UK and the continent Scandinavia, we see that the unaccompanied segment, the row one, is indeed increasing. But stability is probably the headline I would put to all of this, looking at both the revenue but also the EBIT, unfortunately. But when you look at your lower right-hand side, you also see that the invested capital, despite the fact, as I've just explained, we have invested in 6 new vessels, of which 4 are actually deployed in the North Sea area. Even with that major investment, we are able to obtain and retain a reasonable good return on the invested capital. Our customers on the North Sea are primarily freight forwarders, especially as I mentioned before, in the market between the continent and the UK, freight forwarders and hauliers. But what is important for us is also to have that direct relation to the automotive industry, to the paper or forest industry, and the metal industry. All of those representing industries where their cargoes are either heavy or voluminous, and needs transportation means like our vessels. We need to put that location of routes and the port infrastructure in place as a stability factor for our customers. We need a fixed schedule, and we need a high frequency for the model to be attractive. We will often be competing with the alternative of moving traffic by road or rail over land, and therefore the frequency plays an important role. And it goes without saying that the reliability that our customers can actually depend upon, that we have our vessels in place for a fixed departure and indeed fixed arrival, is crucial when at the other end they will be picking up their units. Capacity is key. We need to grow with our customers to making sure, and that is probably the most important part of my job, is always to making sure that we have sufficient capacity in place for our customers to grow. And focusing on our focus areas, organic growth, I just explained, relatively stable, but we grow with the increased attention to the unaccompanied segment by deploying additional tonners. But we are indeed also under organic growth, looking at additional routes that we can put into to our network. Hopefully, we'll be able to announce some of those in the fall of 2022. But what is important is to further automate and digitize what we do. We are in the development phase of a pickup-based booking system, which basically means I don't need to know, or don't need to have a booking from a customer saying, I need to leave from Rotterdam at 1700. No, we need to know, dear customer, when is it you need to pick up your units at the other end? That's actually the important stuff. Just like when you book a flight ticket, you do that knowing you need to be somewhere at a certain time. Once we have the knowledge and the information of that, then we can go back and say, okay, you need to deliver, you need to pick up your trailer at, say, 5 o'clock in 2 days. In that case, you will then have to leave your trailer with us at this point in time in that particular port. Knowing this will decrease the lead time for our customers optimally, and it will at the same time also optimize the utilization of our vessels. So it's really a win-win situation to making sure that the capacity is utilized in the best possible way. This only works with heavy digital investments, which we are doing. And it's we've seen a lot of development over the recent years, and that is definitely something that will continue. Next level in the service is to say, well, we are not only carrying your units from a port to a port. No, we are actually today able to also to accept a unit from an inland terminal in the middle of Germany, as an example, and then make by use of rail the unit transported from that inland terminal to a port of our choice, taking it across the North Sea, and basically also on the other side of the water, moving the unit from a port terminal into an inland terminal. So we are not just a company carrying stuff across water. We take it from inland terminal to inland terminals using ferry as the main mean, but also rail, and indeed as the newest thing as well, inland waterways by using barges as an example, connecting Antwerp to Ghent, and Ghent is one of the ports we're calling from on our Gothenburg service. So customers can choose that, and we will organize that. Finally, the ESG agenda playing a bigger and bigger role for us. As I've said in many occasions, this is what keeps me awake at night, making sure that Dfds and indeed the North Sea operational model is relevant also 20 years from now. And we do that by following our climate action plan to reduce emissions by 45% by 2030 and to being emission-free in 2050. We do that in collaboration with partners in currently two different green corridors on the North Sea, one between Denmark and the UK, and the other one between Denmark and Belgium, in collaboration with the port authorities, with the local authorities in the individual countries, to making a totally green corridor using non-carbonized fuels to carry units across between the two. This is obviously not solved tomorrow, but we are on a good path of doing that. We will very soon introduce a fully electrical barge on the inland waterways, and we have programs to reducing emissions on our vessels in our terminals, as well as a project now to be launched shortly on the first green vessel to be delivered, burning alternatives, non-carbonized fuels. I think I will leave the rest of the time for Q&A.
Thank you very much, Peter. And yes, we are ready to take some questions. And there's a few questions coming in during your presentation. And perhaps you should go a little bit back here in the slides. I'll just move here sort of to the overview here. Peter, could you give us a little bit more flavor sort of on the competitive landscape, the competitors you're facing on these routes, and also perhaps a little bit on what are sort of the most important routes in terms of perhaps volume, earnings? What's the most important for your business here?
I think it's probably visible that Immingham in the UK plays an important role. The mere size of the number of routes coming into that. So this is really our turntable between the continent, Scandinavia, into the UK. The competitive landscape is very different when you look at it, whether you look at it from the continental side, where there is keen competition, a lot of operators, and also, more importantly, also a fixed link, the tunnel, connecting the two countries. So you can imagine the further you go down, the more options customers would have, i.e. the higher amount of competition we'll find in this area. Moving up, well, then we're basically the only one operating out of Cuxhaven with a ro-ro concept. Of course, alternative means like container vessels are operating from almost every port on the continent and in Scandinavia into the UK. But the ro-ro concept is sort of us and us alone when you look at the German corridor, the Danish corridor, and the Swedish Norwegian corridor into Immingham. Does that mean that there is no competition? Of course not. I mean, there are always alternatives, but it is just a different competitive landscape that we're looking at between the two. The most important routes are probably the ones connecting Gothenburg to both Immingham, but also connecting to Zeebrugge and Ghent. Those are the backbones of what we do. I mean, those are the ones I would least like to see leave our network, because they are, as I said, the backbone. That also goes for the Esbjerg service. However, when you compare the two, the possibility to grow is just so much bigger with a hinterland behind Gothenburg than it is between or behind Esbjerg. We simply don't have sufficient heavy industry in Esbjerg to say that becomes a backbone. I hope that answers your question.
Very good. So it's fair to say that on the North Sea, you're not sort of facing the same competition as on the channel, where we often see, or we have seen in the past, new competitors coming up. I think is it some 10, 12 years ago, you had a competitor trying to get in on the Gothenburg-Emmingham route. I think they were called some North Sea Row or something like that, if I don't... if I recall it correct.
It's probably wrong to say that we celebrate, but it's a 10 years anniversary. You're right.
Okay, very good, very good. And that was also maybe a question in relation to this, as you said on one of the last slides, that focus will be on organic growth. And I think you probably also indicated in wrapping up the competitive landscape as acquisitive growth. Is that not an option really, as it's the scalability of the business, etc., makes the number of competitors very low?
Allow me then to just flip back to the map again, because I think it's pretty clear that we are covering the market quite well. We have a solid and sound market position here. That also makes it more difficult to do acquisitions. That's for sure. And that is why our focus on the North Sea is really on the organic side. But nothing can prevent us from opening new routes, as I said, and that is kind of a semi-organic way of growing as well. And we're looking at that as well.
Very good. And now sort of wrapped a little bit on the competitive parts. Could you also tell us sort of a little about your customers? You said earlier on the freight forwarders, who are sort of the I don't know if you cannot probably mention specific names, but how much does sort of the largest customers contribute to your business on these routes in the North Sea?
It's again. It varies from route to route. When you look at Scandinavia, Dfds Logistics actually happens to be one of our biggest customers. So it's an internal customer, and they will be accounting for, say, 25% of the turnover. But the more you move to the south on the continent, the smaller you will find any single customer. Simply, I mean, naturally, because of the competitiveness of the market. So where we are dependent upon big customers, we are often one of those big customers ourselves. And in other markets, less so.
Very good. And that could bring me to sort of the next questions, because how do you handle this? There can probably be a little bit of a conflict now and then, that you both have some clients on one side, and you have Dfds Logistics, which is an internal client, but probably handled as an external in some cases. But you have moved into sort of the logistics in recent years, and some of your customers has the same kind of business. Has that sort of created any challenges in that respect?
I think the key word here is trust. And it's a trust that we have built up with our customers for many, many years. And this is in no way a new thing. We have been operating services like that also at the time where Dfds Transport was a huge part and a much bigger part of Dfds than the shipping part was. It boils down to making sure that and offering Chinese walls between what we do and the information flow that goes between us and our logistics division. That trust, I think, has been established for many years. If we were ever to deviate from running an honest operation, I think we would be punished immediately by other customers. So I don't really have big conflicts or conflicts of interest in mind when I look back, say, the last 10, 15, 20 years, simply because what we do is offering that high frequency and those solutions that are attractive for our hauliers and forwarder customers. If as long as we do that and we do it in an honest and trustworthy way, I don't see that conflict in reality.
Very good. And there's a question that goes here, that's also on the customer part. Are your customers sort of the freight forwarders or the end users? But I guess you have agreements and contracts with the freight forwarders in a lot of cases.
With the structure we have, where we are the infrastructure, I have only direct agreements with freight forwarders. Some of these freight forwarders, one of these freight forwarders is Dfds Logistics, and they will have direct agreements with industries. But we try to keep a clean cut here between the two. So when you speak to the Dfds ferry division, you speak to the infrastructure provider that have agreements with forwarders only.
And in relation to that sort of, not without going into too much details, but could you just give a little flavor on how these contracts or agreements are? Does these freight forwarders promise a certain volume, or is it more around that you set a price with them depending on different kind of volumes? So it also relates into a little bit on how far is your visibility on your business?
It's again slightly varies, but not really very much between the individual routes. Basic model is annual negotiations between us and the forwarders based on volume expectations from the customer side, putting them somewhere on a scale rate wise, with frequent follow-ups on this. Sometimes more than 1 year, typically 2 years of contracts. So visibility, I'd say between 12 and 24 months at any given time, because it's not a 1st of January all times. So generally we try to have and keep that visibility.
And there was a question related to this. There's someone asking here if how important is price in this, and how much sort of is like the added services that you provide, like timely ferry service, flexibility, and those. How much does these things weigh into sort of the full agreement?
We offer, as an example, the example I mentioned earlier on the pick-up-based booking, that is of course a more expensive service than if you just pop by and drop a trailer. So we are trying to combine and bundle services with various value-adding services that creates more, let's say, reliability, higher degree of predictability for our customers, and for every step of higher predictability, arrival time, shorter lead time, all the rest of it, there is a price tag. So this is really going into individual negotiations with our customers, but no doubt this is a value bucket for us to be able to offer these services, and this is why the digital development is so important, because you can basically only do that based on data, and you can only create that visibility to digital solutions. So price is something where we are often an alternative, as I mentioned before, to going via road. So there is kind of a cap to what we can charge. But if you then add the value adding services to it, you will get finally a different and more attractive picture.
Very good. Thank you. And as you stated earlier, and as we can see from the map here, UK is a very important part of this business. And there's also a couple of questions in relation to this. There was one earlier on here. What kind of business opportunities has emerged from Brexit? And another one relating to this is, will Brexit in the long term be good or bad for Dfds? If you can put a few words on that, please.
Yeah. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is, of course, custom clearance services. The obvious thing when the decision was made, we obviously saw that here's a great opportunity to be offering that as one of these bundled services, a custom clearance service, and that's what we do in every port connecting UK with the continent and Scandinavia. Are we in the longer run predicting an upside or a downside on Brexit? Difficult to say at this point in time. So far, we haven't really seen any dip, as I've showed you in the tables before. You don't really see volumes dropping. But I actually happen to be one of those believers saying I think the UK and the situation in the whole global supply chain chaos we are facing right now will attract production back to the UK. So and that has nothing to do with Brexit, other than, well, they can run their own show, like Sweden. Sweden as a production country has done for ages. So I actually happen to believe in increased production, increased volumes coming out of the UK back into the continent to create a better balance between trade.
Very good. And there was a question in relation to this also. How do you see the risk of a potential trade war between EU and UK? I don't know if you've had any sort of intelligence back from your local management in the UK or yeah.
Obviously, this is top of the agenda for us. I mean, constantly keeping an eye on what's going on. I mean, my concern is really the Northern Ireland Protocol. This is the risky spark. I just hope that everyone comes to their senses and will find a solution that will take care of that as well. I really don't see a risk for a trade war. I mean, there's no one that would gain from it. And again, remember, we are in a global supply chain chaos. We see nearshoring taking place. I see the UK becoming more attractive as a production area. So I don't really see why we wouldn't, from the continental side, making use of that as a production arm as well.
Okay, very good. And speaking of the UK, I know it's a little bit out of scope, but there was a question here relating to the issues that also the turmoil that been on the channel in relation to P&O ferries, and I think you also commented on the in the latest quarterly report. But could you put a few words on and how things are developing on the channel?
Right now, we see P&O has come back with 3 vessels, and so we are each of the operators operating 3 vessels between Dover and Calais, and in addition, we are operating our 3 vessels between Dunkirk and Dover as well. Is this sufficient capacity? Yes, certainly. There's more than enough capacity taking place, being provided in the market. And I think that will, over time, find a balanced result. But right now there seems to be a little more peace and quietness in the situation.
Very good. Thank you for that, Peter. I can see we're running out of time, and I think we are through most of the questions. If there's anyone left, I'll just have a quick look here. There's one here asking why a customer prefer to put goods in a container and why on a trailer. I don't know if it's a little bit related to on what kind of products your transport.
No, I think it's a super question because typically the difference between the two containers they're less expensive as a transport mean, but they're typically also a lot slower. Lead time is longer. So it's actually if you need to move commodities within a certain limited time frame, you would choose a trailer. And if you have time enough, you could then use a container. But for us, we need to fill up fixed capacity. And that also means that we have different tables of prices. So we are also operating in the container market. We also carry containers on board our vessels at container rates. So we are kind of playing on both horses in this race.
Very good. I think that was the last question. So I think we will end the presentation for today. Thank you to all of you who participated and had a lot of interesting questions. And thank you very much to you, Peter Gellert, for presenting the North Sea business of Dfds and answering different questions. I may also highlight that we have previously done a deep dive on the Mediterranean division, and we have also done one on the logistics division. You can find those on our YouTube channel if you want to learn more about Dfds. But with that, I'll just wish you all a nice day, and thank you again for listening in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.